You're listening to Policy Room by SPRF.
Hi, hello, welcome everybody to another episode of the Policy Room podcast series by SPRF. Today we have with us a very special guest and my good friend Yash Agarwal. Yash is a public policy coordinator at Twitter, and we are sort of just having a discussion on some very interesting topics surrounding the digitalization of India that is underway. Welcome, Yash.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me, and it's my great pleasure to be here on the show. Thank you.
So, Yash, do you want to go a little bit into, what you sort of do at Twitter?
Yeah, sure. So, currently I work as a public policy fellow at Twitter India, technically designated as a policy coordinator. So, it's honestly just the basic work that a lot of the policy teams in general do in organizations like these, which is working with civil society, with the government, and so on and so forth, right? Yeah, that's broadly the role. And I've been here for I think still fresh in the role. To be honest, it's just been 2.5 months now. But yeah, I love every moment of it. There's just so much to learn and do.
I'm sure that must be very exciting. I have to ask you something because I'm not sure if this is information that I know. But are you the youngest Indian employee at Twitter?
I will still have to cross-check that.
Okay.
I'm not sure. But yes, I'm among the younger ones on the team for sure.
Yeah, awesome. In our old normal, we would have been recording this together in Delhi, but Yash and I are at the moment remotely working from our hometowns. But good to speak with you anyway. And I'm sure a lot of people have asked you this. So just before we jump into the interview, I just have to ask. You don't have any control over the verification process at Twitter, do you?
See, now this is the $1 million question. I have a feeling people will drop out of this podcast after this. But yes, just to answer, no, we just have systems in place, which, it's not something that one individual can influence or get going.
Yeah,
so,
good answer. I'm sure Twitter is very happy. Right. Apart from that, you're also 1/4 of the team that runs Policygram on Instagram. It's an independent information platform that sort of breaks down policy for the younger generation that's on Instagram. So I think you're the perfect guest to have today when we talk about sort of India's digital future, the policies that can guide us into this, and just the digital literacy overall. So, I'll just begin with what we're sort of seeing around us right now. Like, social media in general has taken such a big step during the whole pandemic as it unravels. So many people are on Twitter, on Instagram, sharing information, looking for leads. A lot of journalists are using these platforms to bring forward what's happening on ground instead of all the bureaucratic barriers that they have to be in otherwise. But also there's, because of the amount of information overload on these websites and on these platforms, and so much information that's coming from different parties, there's also been a lot of concern about information that might be fake, information that is being propagated from long back, being said that it's today. And also, in general, a lot of people are saying that these platforms are the ones that need to be responsible for clearing the clutter and for ensuring that the wrong accounts don't get banned and the right ones that are sort of taking part in this fake news situation get shut down.
Right.
So how do you think platforms can sort of step in instead of just being like this, third party? How can platforms ensure that this is a safe space for information dissemination?
Michelle, I would just like to step back a little. And as abstract as this may sound, but these two questions are often joined at hip, which is the role that these platforms play in a democracy and in a society. I think it's very important for us to maybe just consider that for a moment, and then I'm not evading the question, we'll definitely get into this. But just to give a larger picture, and this also stems deeply from my interest in tech policy in general. See, there are three broader trends that platforms like these, which have accelerated and enabled, I would say. First is, something like a Twitter or a Facebook or any such social media platform in general. What they have done is, even the most disempowered and underprivileged of citizens, they have a shot at making their voices and opinions heard, right?
Yeah.
In this broader public discourse.
Yeah.
There is this chunk of population which is let's just say, traditionally excluded or not considered by, say, usual news outlets or any other source of media in that sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And social media platforms, they traditionally mitigate such a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can build an account and they have this platform where they can speak, they can, get their voice heard, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
That's one thing. In fact, now a lot of times what happens is, what is, let's just say, hot on these platforms, what's being discussed on social media, this is something that news media starts picking up. I'll tell you, it's a very interesting thing. Like a couple of days back, I had just come back from a run and my dad was watching news television, and there are these shows which show something like the top 10 headlines of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of those headlines were, this person has tweeted this and this has happened, or this person has posted this and this has happened. They're essentially just, reproducing what's already news that has been made already.
Right.
And I was stunned. That to the extent that the dynamics have changed. So that's one thing, that citizens, even the most disempowered and underprivileged of them, they have the shot at making their voices heard. Second is, they can ensure at least a lot in theory that those who are in power, they remain connected with their constituents and they receive direct feedback every day. Like today, I mean, you must have seen this a lot, especially on Twitter and maybe to an extent on Facebook, that people directly tag their MPs or their offices that this isn't getting done. A lot of people tag the railway ministry account that, hey, this is dirty or this isn't running on time, etc., etc. Like right now, I recently came across someone who had tagged, I think, an account of the Ministry of Finance or I think the Customs Department, that there was a lot of GST or customs duty on ventilators which were being imported in India or being donated to mitigate the COVID-19 crisis, and that shouldn't be the case. And someone from the government had replied that, hey, we are waiving this off, and then the finance minister replied, I think. So broadly, the point is, they play a very strong role in ensuring that even those who are in power, in office, they get direct feedback and they're connected to their constituents and beyond.
Right.
So this is again something new, right? Because this is feedback which is unfiltered, which is coming directly from those who vote and who are affected by the decisions being taken by those in office, right?
Yeah.
Very powerful. And finally, before I'll get to what you asked, and this is something I strongly resonate with as an individual, is that, social media companies, platforms, they significantly also improve how democracy works for millions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, the sheer variety of news, perspectives, viewpoints that an individual readily has access to in real time.
Yeah.
That contributes for making a citizenry which is more informed, which is more engaged, which is more equipped with the knowledge to take nuanced decisions concerning their governments, when they are forming their viewpoints, and so on and so forth. And moreover, these citizens who come across news end up discussing the same as well on these very platforms. They get exposed to new viewpoints, and this has potentially profound implications for civic engagement. So I feel a very important core tenet of what platforms like these enable, which is they just significantly improve democratic participation in that sense,
right?
Broadly speaking. And it's almost like the public sphere as we know of it. Earlier, I'll just use this term in Hindi, like gaon mein chauraha hota tha.
Yeah.
Basically, this large open space when people would maybe just gather, or wherever, the panchayat would meet. I'm just using a very baseline example, but public sphere in any sense, right? They are being reimagined. It's here and now. So broadly speaking, this is how I look at the roles that social media platforms play. And now I'll come to the specific question that you asked, because I feel this was important to give this background. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the thorniest issue of them all, which is to do with free speech, which is to do with censorship, which is to do with disinformation, and all of it, like the entire holy grail of it. Now, there are a couple of things, and I'll be very candid. Number one, right now what's happening is, and again, this is not about one particular company or any particular individual, because the approaches are fairly similar, and
across
of course there are nuances and differences. Right. Yeah, but like the fundamentals are that you deploy both. You deploy human beings and you deploy algorithms or technology to just, figure out what content violates the rules of the platform and what needs to be taken down. Or maybe you review if a user has submitted a particular request, so on and so forth, right? Now, the problem is to do this at scale. You have to steadily shift to more and more of technology, because it is absolutely impossible, right? Practically speaking, to have enough human moderators to sit and decide on each of these cases, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm sorry I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but like literally billions of pieces of content go up every few minutes or hours or so. It's just impossible given the scale at which it's happening. Now, what happens is when you employ more machines, and again, this is all out in the open, very basic understanding that whenever you're applying machines and algorithms to sift through this data, for them to go through what's on the platform and to figure out that, hey, does it need to be there, or maybe flag it to a human moderator for review, there will be nuances that the algorithm will miss out on.
Yeah.
There will be contexts that the algorithm won't be able to figure out, right? There are certain words or terms which are maybe used as a slang in a particular context, and they may be perfectly fine in another.
Right.
And even the same terms in the same language, they're used in different ways given the context of the conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not possible for the algorithms or for the machine to always get it right. And so sometimes, there will be errors. It will be hit and miss here and there. And the problem is this, I'll tell you. And there's something I was reading about recently, again, not about any particular company or individual, but even if, platforms get to say a 99% accuracy, right? Mm-hmm. The thing is, the journey from a 0 to 90 was easy. From a 90 to 99 was difficult, took a lot of enforcement, policy changes, algorithmic improvements, but still doable. Now, the problem is now to get from a 99 to even a 99.5, it's getting there, but the last percentage in which you want to ensure there's no error at all, I think that's gonna take some doing, right? Because even given the sheer base that we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
With billions of pieces of content, even that 0.5%, it actually leads to a hue and cry of all manner. That either something was taken down which was supposed to be there, something which was not supposed to be there was not taken down. It can be in either ways. But the point is that people won't notice that the other 99.5% of harmful speech has been taken down, or the platforms are far healthier or cleaner, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
But of course, given the sheer scale of the platform and the content that they're dealing with, even the 0.1, 0.5%, of course, comes up high in terms of visibility. And I'm not saying that's not an issue at all. That is absolutely an issue. But I'm just trying to explain the trade-offs involved, the scale that we're looking at, and why it's just so difficult to get to a zero, so to speak.
Yeah. And probably require, quite a bit of human touch to sort of, because language is constantly evolving. The way we interact online is changing so fast that I'm sure the algorithm also takes a while to pick up and learn. So I guess it's kind of comforting to hear that computers can't 100% take on what humans can do just yet.
Absolutely, Michelle. I'll just add one thing here because this reminds me of something very interesting I was reading today itself. Emojis, okay? Now, and I can share this article with you later, but there are certain emojis which are used very differently across societies and which come to mean very different things in different contexts. And there's some emojis which may depict harm, but in other societies, they may just be a one-off expression of discomfort, or maybe someone being upset at someone. There's so many nuances. Emojis are used so differently, even within the same countries. And then there are new emojis which always keep coming up. There are some which maybe go out of fashion or whatever. So the point is, even if you keep retraining the algorithm, there's just no end to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to do it for every single country and maybe multiple times within the same. Again, I'm just trying to draw a picture of the sheer scale and complexity of the issue.
Got it. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I love how in your answer, the way you structured it sort of, it was like glimpses of the questions that I do want to go into. So I'm going to slowly kind of go into every bit. So one of the things you mentioned was how social media is sort of like that banyan tree where all the people would sort of get together and discuss things and talk about, and it sort of turned into that arena. And while you're right, it's just that there is a very small chunk of our population that's actually on Twitter, right? And as somebody that, like you and I, we're urban population, we're young people, we're the people that just, are getting into the workforce and have a strong, what do I want to say, like the rising sense of civic duty. So we're constantly on Twitter, and a lot of our information and a lot of our outreach efforts to our representatives is happening on Twitter. But this is not necessarily true for the massive chunk of the Indian population. So I think a lot of people that spend a lot of time on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, sort of getting their information, they feel like what's happening on the platform is an umbrella vision of the sentiment of the country. But that's not necessarily true. A lot of people will go ahead and say that social media is in a bubble about what's really going on in the country, because that's not the pulse of the country. The pulse is in rural India, and the things that happen during elections or elsewhere, it's very different from the climate you would see on social media, probably because the demographic of social media is so different from just the rest of the general population. So do you think that that's a thing? Do you think that social media is a bubble and we need to be a little bit more aware that a lot of stuff exists outside that bubble?
Two things, right? First is the fact that social media bubble is also something that you come to know on social media. So I think I could leave it at that. But no, I'm glad you asked this. And I would love to play around with this because it's a very, very important point that you have raised, and one that genuinely merits consideration. Okay. Let's take up something in the present day, nothing in the distant past, something which is happening right now. This lack of basic medical resources in India right now, say oxygen, hospital beds, ambulance, etc. Let me assume there is a platform X in which just 5% of the Indian population is present. Cool. What is happening is you will see a lot of distress calls and SOS messages and all of it on this platform. And by the way, this has been happening currently across platforms, WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, and all of it, right?
Yeah.
So again, not about a particular platform or individual, but I'm just trying to draw up a picture so that users get where I'm coming from. The point I'm trying to make over here, Michelle, is even if just 5% of India's population is on that platform and they're coordinating relief activities and supplies, a much, much larger swath of the population is benefiting from it. Okay. So if there's someone who's able to marshal resources on the ground owing to the coordination that they are able to do on a Twitter or a WhatsApp or whatever, in reality and in real life, and I mean at the grassroots, a much larger swath of the population is able to benefit from that, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. So the point that I'm trying to make over here is, yes, of course, not everyone is on social media, and that varies depending on whichever platform you'll be talking about. But the point is, whatever happens here, the effects are felt beyond the shores, if I can put it that way, right?
Right.
So, I mean, just because you're not on social media does not mean that it has absolutely no effect on maybe stuff that you may see or do or whatever. So that's one thing. And secondly, I would say things can be a bubble in only one way, which is a bubble of viewpoints.
Okay.
Honestly speaking.
Yeah.
Because if you have people who do polling, and this is like, it's a very scientific process. So it's not something that, randomly conduct interviews and all of it. It's not something I'm very well versed with, but I've read enough to know that it is a very scientific process in which ideas like representative sampling and all of it come into play to make sure that whatever data you collect is representative of the population at large.
Yeah.
So again, the point here is not that, say for example, in the US for every Republican on Twitter, there's another Democrat. No, I'm not saying that there's equality in terms of, the presence on the platform. But the point is, even this very fact that, okay, hey, what all of us are thinking of, it may be different from what the reality is. This is also that comes to you via, say, Twitter itself or via Facebook itself.
Yeah.
Because that alternative voice does exist. And a lot of times what I've seen, Michelle, and I mean, this is what I'm going to say next is something I deeply believe in and more importantly, practice, which is the kind of people whom you follow, you choose to engage with on these platforms. If you keep that list diverse enough, trust me, you can see through most of the things that are happening in real time, right? Honestly, for me to perfect, I mean, there's no perfection in the sense for me to get to a Twitter following list. I'm speaking about the accounts that I follow, has taken me years to get it right. Because always it's like, it's a mix of my interests. It's a mix of the ideologies I profess to. It's a mix of where I may be living at that moment, where I may be working and all of it. But coming back to the point, there's enough diversity of viewpoints everywhere, right? And that's one reason people are often talking at each other and sometimes to each other and all of it from across the ideological spectrum with different beliefs and so on and so forth. It depends on who are the people you choose to engage with, who are the people you choose to follow, and accordingly you'll see stuff show up on your timelines. Yes, there may be more nuances to this than this.
Right.
But broadly speaking, it is not the case that you get only a very specific set of viewpoints or ideas on any of these platforms. Not the case at all.
Okay. I'll actually go into this a little bit Mo, I'm glad you brought up that point, because so I'm just sort of dumbing down the process of how I see a social media platform working, right? It's just that
Right.
a lot of research suggests that social media spaces tend to be a lot more polarized. The way social media has fine-tuned our discussion space is that it's a lot more polarized. And I think that might have to do a little bit with the way content aggregation works. In a general sense, a platform will want you, and any platform, this is not specifically social media, this is true for Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, whatever. They want you to spend more
Right.
time on that platform and less time elsewhere. So they will bring you content that they know you like. So, in the most basic sense, if I get online and I like a post about of someone talking about being anti-vax, just on the basis of that and the basis of the people they follow, I'm going to be shown people from their list that may also suggest, why thinking anti-vax is a good thing, and I'm going to see my feed be populated with similar ideas, and that's going to create an echo chamber. And a lot of people want users to be aware of this very dangerous and high amount of confirmation bias that can exist. And this is not, again, social media specific. This is also, even if you're using like your browser, the kind of
Right.
information they show you is just based off your history. So if I search for something once, it's going to want me to search those things again. So, I mean, for me, like you said, you make sure you follow a lot of diverse set of people. That is an activity that I undertook a few years ago, where I was like, okay, I need to not follow only people that I agree with, but also opinion leaders that are sort of not in my belief system. And to justify that, I had to put in my bio. I was like, accounts I follow are not my endorsement. I'm just
Right.
trying to avoid an echo chamber, because people are very quick to assume who you are based on who you follow. But a lot of people want people to be aware of this and be better users of social media. But do you think that this has made the democratic process a little bit more difficult, that unsuspecting people, their biases are being confirmed based off the way the platform functions? And do you think that there is a need for us to reconsider certain policies that allow platforms to work this way, or is this just a user consideration?
I was just making notes because you've touched on a number of, and all of them equally important issues. I'll get to them one by one. Just give me one.
You're giving me
Yes.
a lot of confirmation bias for being a good interviewer.
Trust me, that's not a bias. That's a reality. But okay, let me just filter it down to three very important points here. You have touched upon three core tenets over here, Michelle. One is this new information ecosystem which has engulfed us. Second is this whole idea of digital literacy. And the third is the role that algorithms play. And I'll address each of these. I'm glad you asked, because these are, topics, issues, subjects which I've been reading for like years now. And this is something which got me into tech policy to begin with. It's super fascinating how some of these things work. Tell me something. Do you feel that social media platforms have made people polarized? Or is it just that people were polarized anyways? It's just that the discoverability has gone up. You don't need to answer right now. Okay? It's just food for thought. And I'll come to this at the end of my answer. The first thing is this, Michelle. Any new technology that comes, you take railroads, you take airplanes, you take the telephone. There have been many decades over which the rules for it have been laid out, over which the society has taken to normalize it, and over which the society has, for the lack of a better word, become educated, or, in how to use the technology and just assimilate it in our societies. So if you take any fundamental technological change which has come before this, that has been the case. And if you look at where we are today, the internet is very young. The internet is really, really young by those standards, right?
Especially in India.
And even most of us, even most of our social media. I mean, the internet is young, that's one thing. The social media platforms and this, this idea of people using the internet for companionship and all of this is even younger, right? It's nascent in that sense. So please just have this, and I mean, this is for the listeners, that we are just engulfed by completely new dominant mechanisms of information ecosystems right now. So there's a lot we don't know that we are still trying to figure out. There's trial and error, and all of that is involved, right? Just because it's a fundamentally new technology in that sense. So that's one thing. The second is, I feel a lot of this is, again, for the lack of a better word, a literacy problem, in the sense, not literally at all.
Yeah.
Just in the sense that, like, okay, take what we were discussing just before this. Like, for example, you and I, we follow a very, and this is on purpose, we purposefully follow very diverse viewpoints and handles on our social media profiles. And that's on purpose, that's out of choice, because we know the implications that has in terms of biasing us against or for a particular subject, exposing us to different viewpoints, informing us better, and all of that. Where did this come from? It essentially stems from the fact that you and I were exposed to some form of literacy in this sense, that just following people you agree with is not good for you, right? And a lot of this comes from this idea that we have internalized that I need exposure to diverse viewpoints, and I can find it on this platform if I do this, if I follow X or Y. It's right.
Yeah.
So this is, I mean, at its crudest form, this is literacy, right? For our presence on these platforms.
Right.
So the point I'm trying to make is that this whole idea of, to put it at a very basic level, this whole idea of internet literacy or digital media literacy or whatever you may choose to call it, this needs a greater thrust.
Yeah.
Right? Because it ties up with the previous point that I made. These are completely new information ecosystems which are engulfing us. So it'll take time before people get used to just getting all of the basics right, in the sense what's best for them. And of course, this needs more efforts from all parts of our society, from civil society and tech platforms, and even in our educational curriculum, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the third and the most important thing, this whole idea of you clicking, say for example, today I like a post from President Biden, and tomorrow the algorithm might start recommending me stuff from the Democratic Party or whatever. Now, there's one thing that we have to understand, Michelle, which is algorithms are critical for allowing us to make sense of the world that is online. Take my word for it. This whole idea of, an internet completely unmediated, completely unfettered in that sense, from any algorithmic help. I mean, it's real. For example, on Twitter, we have something known as the sparkle icon. You click on that and the algorithms are out. You just see posts in a chronological order. And it's there on other platforms as well. I think it's coming up. So it's like, if you choose, you can do that to a limited extent. But algorithms are, in a lot of ways and in a lot of senses, important for helping us make sense of the world that is online. Right? They organize content. They streamline it. They present it to us in a manner in which we can consume and understand and process. And the role that they play goes far beyond just giving, if you like X, then giving you more of X. No, it goes far beyond that. I'm just trying to, cut through this very simplistic image that people have. Of course, I'm not denying that that is the case. That is the case. And hey, today if you buy a t-shirt from Marks and Spencer's, and tomorrow from Marks and Spencer, you'll receive a newsletter saying that, hey, why don't you buy more of this? Again, this is not about a particular brand or an individual. I'm just trying to say this is how things are organized, because there are commercial interests as well. There's a lot of practical interests as well, that people can actually make sense of the stuff that they're seeing, and so on and so forth, right? So it's a lot more nuanced than just being like, as I mentioned, that if a person likes X, give more of X to him or her. No. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And let's sort of move on to the whole, digital literacy thing you mentioned, the general digital climate in India. Everything is moving online. And through the pandemic, the process has been accelerated ridiculously. Even before, banking was, I think, a sector that was already quite integrated with the way the internet functioned. Entertainment, tourism, these were all, segments that were sort of already making that climb. But through the pandemic, now education, health, FMCG. In fact, I feel like throughout the whole process of recovering from COVID, everything from finding help to booking yourself into a hospital to ordering medicines, and getting yourself a test, getting yourself a vaccine, it's all been sort of just on your handheld device. And throughout this process, obviously, things like the cybersecurity segment, all of this has sort of taken a center stage. What do you see for the future of digital India? Are we going too fast, or was this a needed push? Basically, I'm asking how close to Men in Black are we?
I'm not sure if you've read this or not, Michelle, but this is extremely popular essay by Andreessen Horowitz. It's called "Why Software is Eating the World," and I think this it was written way back in 2011 or 12, something like that. And the whole premise of the essay was that software is. I'll come to the explanation, but broadly speaking, software is eating up much of this physical value chain of industries. That we see as, assets or key to operations today. Like, in the sense, okay, let's take up the vaccines, for example.
Yeah.
The newest kid on the block or the newest entrant in the types of vaccines we have is this mRNA vaccines, right?
Yeah.
I'll keep it extremely abstract because, again, no expert in this. So I'll just stick to the very basics of how this functions is. I mean, what I was reading recently is that the day, I think this was Pfizer or Moderna, either of these, that they got the virus's genomic sequence. Within a couple of days, I think they had the vaccines ready in its most fundamental form.
Yeah.
And the idea is, this was essentially, if you look at it, this was just coding in a sense, right? Because mRNA vaccines, what they do is they just teach our cells how to make a protein or a piece of protein that triggers some immune response in our bodies. Right?
Yeah.
Basically, produce antibodies. So this is far removed from the world in which we would actually inject weakened viruses or inactivated viruses into the human body. Right? This is not that. This is just like
reprogramming.
This is programming in that sense, right? I mean, we're just telling the body that, hey, produce this antibody in response to this virus. And if this is not software eating the world, then what is? I mean, even for vaccines, and it's phenomenal what's happening. So, coming back to your question, see, I feel this is fairly abstract, this whole idea of future of digital India, but I'll pick up on a few key themes which concern me the most and which fascinate me the most as well at the same time. One is this whole idea of digital divide.
Yeah.
Because this is as fundamental as it gets. Because if you don't have access to the internet to begin with, then, everything else just falls flat on its face, right? Now, I think the most recent figures, about 600 million Indians are on the internet.
About 45%
so that means
the
half
total population is on the internet. Penetration, I think, about 45%.
Yes. So that means half of India is not there yet on the internet. But if you look at it over just the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, the uptake has been dramatic. I mean, the chart, if you look at it, like the number of Indians who have come online for the first time is phenomenal. I think, I don't know, I just don't remember the figures, but it was like, I think Indians in the double digits were coming online for the first time in every second for a couple of years or so. So, digital divide, of course it exists.
Yeah.
It's being bridged to a huge extent, but we have an equally long way to go. Right? That's one thing. Secondly, this whole idea of, again, I'll just give you an example, and I was reflecting on my own privilege just a few days back. So I subscribe to a lot of these international publications. As you know, more and more of good journalism is going behind paywalls, and obviously it is. It takes money to, it takes a lot of resources to keep these organizations run. Yeah, exactly. So I figured out that some of the organizations that the publications that I read and I subscribe to, I think a couple of them allow subscriptions just via credit card, not even debit card. And those who do, a lot of them don't accept, they accept debit cards only of a certain type. Like most of the RuPay cards, they're not accepted or whatever. And then I read up on this, and I think just 1 or 2% of Indians have credit cards or thereabouts. And I was like, okay, like there's so many types of divides. And even if I manage to get on the internet and if I want to read stuff from, I can trust. And which I want to access, but it's behind a paywall, I can't even do that because then there's this other level of divide that's there.
Right.
So that's one thing, this whole idea of divides that people can't even have access to what's on the internet. But there's this entire world, Michelle, which fascinates me the most, which is, dude, there's so many people out there who have not gone to college, who have not been able to afford an education, and today they are masters at, say, coding, who have built an entire career out of skills they picked just online, who have changed the fortunes of their family. I think the name of this organization, one of these organizations, I think it's Nav Gurukul or something, in which they just essentially rehabilitate girls from the most underprivileged of backgrounds across villages in India, and they put them in coding classes, okay? And then today these girls, and they are working at some of the most prestigious and reputed IT firms in India as front-end developers or whatever in Java and all of it, and making a very decent living for themselves and giving their family lives which they couldn't have even imagined. There's so many experiments online in which people are like, no need to go to college and spend lakhs and crores there.
Yeah.
Just pick up key skills and you'll be able to make a living and all of it. So, I mean, the positive side of it is phenomenal if you look at it.
Yeah.
And I feel this will benefit India more than the most because, number one, it's an open society. So, it's not like we have our version of China's great firewall in that sense. I mean, we have access to the same information, almost the same information, which someone in the US or Mexico or Japan might, right? Broadly speaking. So, the tools are there at our disposal. Number two, the cost of accessing data has crashed in India, right?
Yeah.
And anyone who wants to access the internet, again, there's not anyone, but still, broadly speaking, a far larger swath of Indians can access the internet today than they could have at any time in our history, right?
Right.
That's one thing. And then this will benefit us and our economy in other ways as well, right? This whole tide of digitization, it will lead to maybe increased outsourcing. And India is the back office of the world, as people call it, for a lot of these industries and so on and so forth. So that is there. Now, the thing which worries me the most is this whole idea of, one is this lack of, a particular and a holistic, say, data protection legislation in India, although it's in the works. And I think this was the K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India case in 2017, in which Supreme Court declared privacy as a fundamental right? Right. And then there was this entire committee under Justice Shri Krishna to come up with this draft law and all of it. We still don't have it yet, but again, I won't get into the specifics of that. Way too nuanced, and maybe for some other day. But we need something like that so that Indians who are accessing internet for the first time and increasingly sharing their personal details and data and all of it, there's this proper layer of enforcement of laws vis-a-vis privacy and safety online and all of that.
Yeah.
Very important. And third, and my final point here is, which draws me back to my previous, to my answer to the previous question, which is this whole idea of literacy. I think this should be a part of our educational curriculums.
Yeah.
All of, the younger generation of India, which is in schools and maybe colleges and all of it. And even in the broader educational curriculum setup and the way we look at it, this should be a part of the syllabus. This should be something we teach. This is something we should teach in classes. This is something we should be taught purposefully. This should not be an accidental byproduct of someone just, exploring stuff online and they come across that, hey, okay, this is important. Or this should not be discovered by people in hindsight after they have suffered, say, losses or damages because of the lack of this literacy, more importantly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So these are the 3 or 4 broad strands of thought. When I think of, say, something as abstract as a digital India, that comes to my mind. But sorry, there's been a lot of...
I love absolutely how you go ahead and answer my question before I've even asked it. So I will actually go ahead and pick on 2 things because, like you mentioned, we can go for hours about this. It's a very, very interesting and very relevant topic for all of us. But so you mentioned about penetration and how there's a large chunk of the population that's not online. And of course, as so many vital functions and so many daily things are sort of moving into the online sphere, are you worried at all that there are a lot of people that are being left behind at such a quick pace that they might not be able to catch up? And obviously this includes people that are in internet darkness, but also people with disabilities who are not able to get onto certain platforms, applications because they're not, accessible.
Right.
Right. In that case, do you think India's sort of outlook on the digital India, the big project to digitize India, should it be more intensive where we sort of build on what we have? Because obviously that's important to sort of, keep building on what we have. Or should we move our perspective to be more extensive and cover more ground before we, develop what we already have? Okay, first off, Michelle, this idea of digital India being a project,
I mean, of course, it's some government scheme, which is fine. But broadly speaking, I mean, in the sense that you mean it, it's not an organized, very, structured, some national force, or how do you put it? It's not something which has been laid out somewhere. It's a very organic process, which we are getting on with bits and pieces as people are coming online. They're getting access to the internet for the first time. They're discovering its benefits and all of it. It's a very, very organic process at present, which has both deep inequities baked into it, but at the same time, phenomenal scope for people to, just climb up the social ladder and build a better life. Now, I'll address both of these. Just to answer your question first, yes, of course, it is concerning that, I mean, I was reading this article recently in which this gentleman in Uttar Pradesh, I mean, a lot of people in general, they were like, I didn't know that you could ask for oxygen on Twitter, otherwise I would have and my mother would have been alive. And that's very shocking that, I mean, this is what people are going through, but after a point, it's not even shocking anymore because you're aware of the realities that, I mean, this divide does exist. So there's no getting back on that. Despite all the great work that's come out of social media platforms of late, all the phenomenal help that's come out of it. And I mean, of course, there are people who are not there who don't have access to it. It's a plain simple fact.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of people being left behind, most certainly, it's a huge concern. And the thing with the internet is, I mean, it's almost like a virtuous cycle. You gain access to a particular set of knowledge or resources, then you gain a leg up, and then you build on that and you gain a further leg up and all of it. I mean, it tends to accentuate in that sense, right? So someone who's not there, the divide will only get starker. So I believe our focus, and again, this is not any specific policy prescription, but the idea is the focus should most certainly be on bridging this divide. It can be via, say, having public Wi-Fi hotspots everywhere in India, or it can be maybe access to subsidized hardware. There's 10 things that the government can do. But the idea is the focus should just be on bridging this divide instead of demonizing those who are already online and have access to these tools and being like, hey, you have access to these people don't, this is not correct. And that's not the point. The point is everyone should have access to this.
Yeah.
Right? That's where we are looking to get at. So this is what I believe our energies should go into. Yeah.
Well put. I definitely agree. And lastly, you mentioned about teaching digital literacy in schools, and the sort of new education policy sort of tried to bring coding into classrooms. And while that is one thing, do you think that there are other significant ways to skill or reskill our population, which is a major upcoming talent pool for India always has been, especially in the tech industry. But so as to not be left behind in this, when the pandemic recovery starts to take up, is there a skilling gap that exists that we need to look at filling, from an administrative governance point of view?
Right. Yeah. What you just mentioned, Michelle, it has two completely different questions embedded in it. I'll tell you why. So the first is this idea of digital literacy or awareness, media literacy, which is about, being aware and equipped with this, this whole mindset of how can you be safe online. Yeah, that's one thing. I think your question focuses more on this whole idea of upskilling, right?
Yeah.
For this emergent economy.
Yeah.
And that's why I think you mentioned, very rightfully you mentioned this whole idea of coding that the new education policy also proposes. There's absolutely no doubt about this fact that, in fact, I think you would have, also come across write-ups and articles in which there are a lot of industries in which people are looking to hire, but they don't have enough people with the right skill sets, right? And then companies either have to invest completely in upskilling employees, but sometimes they are not really willing to because they're like, what if he or she leaves tomorrow for a competitor or whatever? I mean, there are nuances to this, but broadly speaking, it's an expensive process in that sense for certain functions and roles. So this is one thing. Secondly, we have this whole program of, the National Skill Development Corporation, I think that's the name. And there's another program, the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. Again,
Kaushal Vikas Yojana, yep.
I think, right. So we have these programs in place. They are these industrial training institutes which exist. I wouldn't say that anything good has come out of it. Some of it has, of course, especially at the lower levels, right? in which, I mean, when I use the word lower level, I do not mean to say that these jobs are less important, not at all. I'm just saying that lower in the digital hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
More physical occupations in that space. But, the problem as I see it with this setup, Michelle, is that no bureaucrat, no IS officer ever can fully understand what skills are needed, what skills will be needed 5 years from now so that we can start training today, to what extent we'll need someone with a particular skill and where we'll need it, in what industry. It's beyond anyone's comprehension to figure this out. So this whole idea of that, you set up a scheme and a Government of India program and maybe a department within a ministry and this will get done, doesn't happen. What instead we could do is, again, this is a very, let's just say, underdeveloped policy prescription, but it's just along the lines of thought that I have for this, which is maybe we could offer people the opportunity to pick and choose where they would want to get skilled, what skills they would like to pick up, which industries they want to, get into, and support them by means of, say, vouchers, or, just provide them that subsistence support that while they are learning, while they are getting educated, while they're picking up those skills, the basics are maybe taken care of. And more importantly, this is just one small part of it, more importantly, maybe make available those resources for skilling to them. That can be in the form of educators, videos, other learning resources and material, etc. Right? The idea is people make those organic choices depending on whatever is needed. It's almost like a supply-demand equation at this point. Right? Yeah. People know what works best for them. No single ministry can decide what's better for everyone than that person deciding that individually, what's in her or his best interest. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Maybe we can support them, equip them, but that's about it. They can go about making their choices, and that'll be a far better, more useful, more efficient way of going about this whole idea.
Yeah. Definitely. I think letting people know the best way to make use of this internet boom so that it helps them, in not just their careers, but the way they access the world, I think is the prime importance here. And I think that's a great note on which we can bring our discussion to end. Thank you so much, Yash, for giving me your precious time and for enlightening us on this very interesting, very relevant topic. Our listeners, we can go ahead and share some links to some of the readings that you've suggested. It'll probably be on our website or in the description of our episode. I think we'll figure out a way to let our listeners know. Otherwise, you guys can follow Yash on Twitter on his unverified account at, what is it, Yash Agarwal M?
Yeah.
Yes, Yash Agarwal M.
At
Yash Agarwal M on Twitter. And also, he's got Policygram over on Instagram, so you can check that out as well. Thank you so much, Yash, for being here today and for talking to us. I definitely learned so much in our discussion.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. It's been an absolute pleasure. And please take care and stay safe.
Yes,
Speak soon.
Yes, you too.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Policy Room, produced by the Social and Political Research Foundation. SPRF is a youth-oriented public policy think tank based in New Delhi, working to spark dialogues for a better democracy. Stay tuned for more episodes coming soon.